Thanks, Thomas, for having us and having Jay and me here today. And thank you all, the rest, for joining and listen to all the sane and insane stuff we can share today. The sane part is my part of the presentation. The insane part, Jay's, like Jay and I normally work. Yeah, so thanks for joining. First, a bit about Jay, and who can better say something about Jay than Jay himself.
So yeah, thanks for having us. We love doing this and helping developers get better at these little soft skills. So a bit about me, I've been on the business end of the industry now for 25 years. I've worked as an agent, I've worked as a publisher, a developer, ran a production studio, and then for the last 10 years, I've been running the Powell group. And so we focus pretty exclusively on business marketing, licensing, consulting for everybody from conferences to developers to publishers to tech companies. And then in addition to that, 3 years ago, I started the Indie Game Business Initiative, which does exactly this as well. We use it as a means of teaching developers how to learn all the various parts of the business side of the industry, because it's not something that's taught very often. So that's me in a nutshell.
On my side, I'm one of the co-founders of Meet to Match. Hopefully, some of you have already used our platform at some of the game events we help co-organize. We are hired by B2B game events all across the world. Last year, in the virtual world, there were 40 game events across different continents. Luckily, within the cooperation with Jay, we already did a first virtual event together in 2018. So our event platform was all set for online events because of Jay's. And I think I haven't thanked him for that in the past. Or when I did, I haven't thanked him enough, because our pivot was quite easy, so to say, in March when stuff went sour. So yeah, next to being an event platform, we also are hired by governments or developers or publishers to do scouting, so to find new games or to find publishers and investors for games. So after doing this for a little over 10 years, I'm not the dinosaur that Jay is, but 10 years still feels like a very long time. I've seen my fair share of and done my fair share of pitching. So first of all, virtual events versus live events. God, I miss live events. And why I miss live events is because I think that the best example of this is what I came to realize is that when you have virtual calls like this, you are never looking people in the eye. So to look people in the eye, you need to look at the camera. But when looking at the camera, you can't look in the other person's eyes. So, and that's just one tiny example of how it's already different, but it's quite essential. Making an impression, making jokes, etc., having a beer after you've done a pitch, it's all impossible right now, or pretty impossible. On the other hand, this whole virtual part also created a lot of opportunities. There are lots of events going on, one with Jay at the beginning of March, already coming up. And on those virtual events, publishers and investors from all around the world are able to join instead of the ones that are able to travel to a physical event. On the other hand, developers from all around the world are your competition now as well. So it has its pros, it has its cons, but making an impression is so incredibly important. So whatever you do, whenever you're talking to somebody, whether make them laugh, make them cry, preferably not, but make a lasting impression. And I think simultaneously, in this whole virtual event world, do pre-work, do the research. There are so many events, don't attend them all. really like, look, what do I need as a game developer? What do I need as a studio? Which publishers are going to a specific event or not? How many competition is there? So do I want to go to a virtual GDC or Gamescom event where there are an abundance of other developers and the publishers get overrun by requests? Or do I take a very niche event that is about hyper casual games and I'm focusing on that one? So doing that research on what you need and where you can get that is really important. Then there's obviously the pitch, and we will go deeper in that in the next kind of slides. Very important. That's the core of this this presentation. And then people also tend to forget how important the post work is, the follow up, and try to avoid. So I'm already like lifting a tip of the slide that's coming later. But try and avoid sending lots of emails or using email as your only channel. Use LinkedIn, use other channels to get in touch and get that attention. And again, circling back, making that impression. Then about the pitch deck. There is no answer to what is the ultimate great pitch deck, because it has to do what are your goals, what are your needs, and who are you pitching to? Are you talking to a publisher or are you talking to an investor? That's the biggest distinction. But even within that scope, for investors, there are angel investors, project investors, equity investors. You need to adapt your pitch, and we will go a bit in depth in those both too. We will focus mainly on the publisher side, because for lots of studios that are starting up, that is the first one the first ones to approach very often. And I'll give Jay the stage as he's one of the experts on this matter.
So yeah, one of the questions that we get quite frequently is, what do I put in a pitch deck? And we get it frequently enough that we actually have sessions on our Discord every Thursday where we give live feedback on pitch decks. So the first thing to keep in mind is, when you're looking at the difference between a pitch deck for a publisher and one for an investor, it's largely going to be the same. The difference that you have to keep in mind is an investor is interested in the long-term health and success of your company. Publishers are primarily interested in the long-term success of your game. So when you're showing financials and backgrounds and projections and things, that part is going to change. But in terms of what the game is and that sort of stuff, it's going to be very, very similar. So you want to keep your slide deck at this phase. That initial pitch deck needs to be between 10, 15 slides. Don't send somebody 30 some slides for one game. What's going to happen is they're going to start clicking through it, and then they're going to look and see that there's 30 slides, and they're going to go no, and they're just going to phase out. You're going to lose their attention. So start out simple. Game image, show the logo, your team. Don't focus on it. It's just there basically as that cover page for your deck. Then go into the basics. You want to show the publisher what platforms it's going to be on, what genre it's going to be in, what's your monetization model, what's your target audience. And that's all stuff like Fedor was talking about that you need to be figuring out in that pre-work stage, because publishers that only do free-to-play games, you shouldn't be sending a premium game to, and vice versa. But so you outline the basics of the game and make sure that it aligns with the goals and whatever the publisher's already doing. And then put 3 to 6 features in there. And so that's important versus the next slide, which is unique selling points. And so the best analogy that I can give you on what's a feature versus what's a unique selling point, look at Fortnite. So when Fortnite first came out, we were still very early on in the world of Battle Royale. The majority of the industry basically knew about DayZ and PUBG, and that was it. And so you could say, yeah, we're going to drop into an island with 100 people. There's going to be 16 different weapons and 5 different armor types and power-ups that you pick up, and you fight to the middle as this thing's, as this cloud of whatever is closing in on you. And so that was very much close to a unique selling point at the time. Now in the industry, we're well beyond that. And, a battle royale is no longer a unique selling point. It's basically an entire genre on their own, but you can still look at Fortnite in terms of what is their unique selling point. And it's the fact that you can build and destroy buildings on the fly. Unique selling points in this industry are very difficult to come up with, especially if you're saying, we're doing something that absolutely no one else is doing, because that's virtually impossible in the industry now. But you want to find those things that make your game stand out significantly from other games in the genre. So what your unique selling point is could be something that's completely basic in another genre, but it's new to the genre that you're working with. If all of a sudden somebody in a battle royale where you can pull out into a commander screen and control your troops like a RTS, yes, that's something we've been able to do forever in an RTS, but it's not something you can do in a battle royale. So that would be a unique selling point. That's what you have to, think through. How many people, how many characters you have, how many weapons, how many armies, how many whatever. Those are all features. Things that make you stand out significantly from other games in your genre are the unique selling points. And that's where you really do have to do a whole lot of, data gathering on your competition in the industry. The next one is your story or background overture. Go to Steam, look at the pages for Fallout and Skyrim. Couldn't think of that for a second. Those are great examples. Those are both stories that we know have huge, deep lore and stories and history that go along with them, but they don't beat you over the head with that on the Steam page. They give you the high level. So you want to go in keep it to one slide, give the high level story overview, but don't go into the reason that the elves and the dwarves have been fighting for 500 years in your world, because at this stage, no one cares. Everybody knows elves and dwarves fight. So get the high level in there and get them enough to get interested in it, and then you can give them the deeper details later. Next one is your trailer or gameplay video. Fedor, you can kick to the next slide. This is always something that's going to be extremely important. When you look at how many games are getting pitched to publishers these days, I talked to one publisher last week who had over 2,000 games submitted to them in 2020. We're seeing studios publishers on the low end having 100 games a week being submitted to them. You don't have 15 minutes to, sorry about that, school's calling. We don't have 15 minutes to go through and get everybody hyped up about your game. You have roughly 3 seconds. And I'll say on the high end, you have 10 seconds that you have to get somebody hooked, or they're going to completely just lose interest in going somewhere else. So your gameplay video needs to be well done and concise, but don't spend a whole minute on some fade in with your logo and your screen and all that sort of stuff. You want to get to the meat of it really quick. And I know you are going into deeper detail on how to good game trailer later on. So we don't need to, sit on it. For, the next couple of slides is your concept art and screenshots. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see developers make and stuff that we look at is they'll have like 8 slides of 3 different angles of the same character model or something like that. You don't need that. They just want to get a high level overview. So what I would usually recommend is, one slide with 3 or 4 or 5 concept art pieces and another slide with screenshots. And you have to make sure that your screenshots show the UI, because UI and UX is such a big part of the industry right now. Publishers want to get a good idea that you do understand it, and you're not building something that's completely clunky and in a vacuum. But also make sure that you're showing variety, and this goes with your trailer as well. You don't want 4 or 5 screens that all look the same. If your game has multiple worlds in it and these worlds have different color palettes, show that. Show variation. Show your character when they first get started and they're just wandering out of their village with a little tunic and a wooden sword, versus the end of the game when they've got massive epic armor on and they have all these spells going everywhere. You want a good variety in there, but you don't have to do 5 or 6 different slides of just your concept art. You want to keep it short. Schedule and budget. So this is one that gets come up, you're going to get a lot of variations and a lot of opinions on, do I put my budget in your slide deck? Yes, it's always been my 20 some years. I always do it. I always tell our clients to do it. publishers have a set of criteria that they're going to go down, when they're first looking at your project. And one of those is budget. And so if their budget for the rest of the year only allots $500,000 for funding, and you come in with a game that looks interesting, and they spend a lot of time looking at it, and then they get you on the phone and you're like, oh yeah, well, we need $3 million to get this done. You've wasted your time, you've wasted their time. So, we always sit down and say, put your budget in there, rough milestones, what you're going to do, when you're going to finish it, and go ahead and drop it in the agreement, so everybody has a frame of reference. We all know, because I do scouting for publishers as well, that budgets are fluid. You may not need as much if you get something, on a higher, say, marketing take, or the rev share is higher. There's tons of different buttons and levers and knobs you can twist in a contract, but you do need to give your publisher or your investor a good idea of what that ballpark range, starting point is anyway for a budget. Then go on to your company profile. In the next 3 slides.
Well, maybe Jay, just to interrupt, is one of the questions we got preliminary to the session was, how detailed does it need to be? And I think you're implicitly already answering, but explicitly, just to make sure, it needs to be a high-level overview in a breakdown in a one slide. If they need more information, they will request the more information from you at a later stage or in the conversation that you are having.
Yeah, exactly. This should be one slide. You don't need your full-blown Excel spreadsheet outlined in this. You just want to go through and say, this is our budget. And sometimes you can put a pie chart in there. This is how it's going to be, how the budget's allotted, and this is when we're going to need milestones. But you don't need to go into super deep detail at this stage. All right, so company profile, the experience of your team leads, those go a bit together. This is where you have to be honest. When you put your company profile in, if you've got a track record as a studio, that's awesome. Put it in there, show what games you did, what platforms it was on. Links to stores is always beneficial as well. Now, if you are a brand new studio that hasn't produced anything yet, that's where you say that. It's like, look, we're new, but here's our team. And that's what bleeds into the team leads. Here's our team. This is what they've done in the past. So you've still got that level of, experience in there. It's just not as a solid team yet. You've all worked on different projects. So you don't necessarily, and the other thing is you don't necessarily need to include every single person on your team. For the sakes of publisher pitch decks, investor pitch decks, they're primarily interested in your leads. Who's your design lead, your production lead, engineering lead, art lead, that sort of stuff. All right, so next slide.
Yeah, and it's also the same like a resume. If you want to apply for a job somewhere, if you ended up in a global game jammer as a number 2 or number 1 project, those are achievements too. It says something about your potential. So don't be shy, but be honest, like Jay said.
Now, so the next question is, so what if our team hasn't done anything in the past and we don't have experienced people either? We're basically fresh out of university or we're coming from other industries. That's fine. But be honest about it, because there are a lot of publishers out there who love to work with new teams, because they can help them and walk them through everything. There's other publishers out there who only want to work with, experienced teams. You're not going to get ahead in either way if you're lying about who your team is. So the best policy is just always to be honest and upfront. This is our team. These are our leads. This is the experience we have. Don't try to, fluff up your pitch deck. So the next slide is what we call your social media footprint. And so this is how many wish lists you have, how many followers on, Facebook and Twitter, how big is your Discord? Do you have a mailing list? How many people are on that? The big question that always comes up is, if I put my game in early access, or if I put it in, a Google beta or something, is that going to inhibit my chances of getting a publisher? And the answer is always maybe. It just depends on who the publisher is and what they do. The reality is there are plenty of publishers out there who don't want to touch anything that's been announced in any way, shape, or form. If it's been on early access, they consider it already launched. They don't want to touch it. There's other publishers out there who only want games who already have this community built up, and they want to make sure that there is a need. You know, you've done a Kickstarter or whatever it is, that there's already market potential for this game. You're going to lose some of them no matter which one you do. So go either way. We always recommend developers, you know, start building their community as soon as humanly possible, because worst case scenario, you don't get a publisher, but now you've got a community that you can self-publish with. But that social media footprint is where you put all the data, all the stats on that, and how many people love you and love your game. And then, you know, your contact information. And I know a lot of people are like, well, they're going to have my contact information because I just emailed them this slide deck. And that's not always the case. Whenever you submit a slide deck to a publisher, there's always a green light meeting that is happening at some point in time. And there's a lot of different stakeholders and, you know, people who have a say in what's going on, that this deck gets passed around. They don't all have your contact information. So it's always good to put your website, a Discord link, however they can get a hold of you, in that final slide. And, you know, like we said, keep it 10 to 15 slides. You know, you should not be sending 20, 30 page slide decks unless you are pitching, you know, 4 or 5 different projects. You want to keep it nice, sweet, simple, and get their attention, because then you can send them all the information that you possibly need, the detail, in a follow-up.
Yep. So then the pitch deck for investors, like Jay and I said in the beginning, there are differences, but there are not too many differences. And like Jay said, so their investors are investing in you as a company, as a team, and publishers very often do it on a product basis on your game. So you might want to change the order of your pitch deck a little bit, and it also depends who are you, again, within the investor range pitching to. Is it a project investor, so the product is important, or is it, again, an equity investor or an angel investor? But most of all, they want to know what your vision is. So if you have a track record on free-to-play games, and all of a sudden your new project on your roadmap is a premium shooter, then highly likely the investor will think like, wait, what? Where is that expertise coming from? So show your track record where you came from, show where you're going, show why you think that you are the best kid on the block in that field, or at least can take a considerable piece of the pie there. Look at the investment opportunities. So what is your valuation of your company now? And what will be the return in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? And then connect that again with your roadmap. How many games are you gonna produce? That kind of stuff. But again, keep it short, keep it simple, and if it's interesting enough, and if you stand out, then they will come back to you. And they're not always. So they will come back to you if you're having a really great, awesome idea, the hidden gems, but very often, 99% of the cases, they don't. So what do? You follow up. The best recommendation that Jay and I can get you is get a CRM. And a CRM can be free. There are lots of free stuff, but don't start to do things in an Excel sheet, because every free CRM even has the way of setting reminders. So it's helping you to keep on pushing. And whenever you have your first game out, you can always upgrade to a better CRM that's helping you out there. But keeping track of all these things and keeping the CRM updated is really crucial in the business. Don't harass the contact. So don't immediately send an email, send a LinkedIn request, do a Facebook connect, and then try and hook them up on their own Discord server. But what I do recommend is, if you're following up every week, is that you switch channels, because especially in this whole virtual world, people are emailed a lot. So the email box of many people is not a not the best way to look, especially not like Jay said earlier, that when you receive 100 game pitches a day. So look at it from the LinkedIn one. Don't send that LinkedIn request immediately after you've done the pitch, but do it the week after you send the follow-up mail. Like, hey, have you seen my email there? You can also check if it ended up on spam, etc. Follow them on Twitter and use the information they're sharing there to connect it to your pitch. Again, make that impression, make that you show them that you investigated, that you researched, and that you know what you're talking about, that you really want to talk to them about this project. Then there's also the kind of interesting tweaks that a CRM has. Pay attention to open and clicks if the CRM tracks that. So whenever I'm sending emails and I know that Thomas has opened it up once, twice, or 3 times a week, highly likely he is interested in following up. So it moves Thomas up my list of people to contact first. So in this way, it can help you see whoever is really interested and whoever already looked at your pitch deck or your video. And then we can't say this often enough: be polite. They're really busy. They don't ignore you for fun. They're not all assholes. Obviously, some are, but most of them aren't. Really nice people like you and me, but just overflooded with work. So be polite. If you're not needing them for this project, don't burn your bridges and your ships behind you for the next one. It's the best way of getting things going. It's like real life. So many of the questions.
We had a quick question.
Yeah.
So somebody asked, should the pitch deck display the choice of technology stack that the team will be using? Yes, I usually put that under that early slide where it's got genre and features and all that sort of good stuff. That is important, especially if you're going to need the publisher's help in porting to other consoles or something like that. They need to get an idea of which tech stack you're using. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and it also highly depends on what game you are publishing. If you're doing a hyper-casual games, the standard right now in hyper-casual publishing is that you're using Unity because it can easily integrate with SDKs from publishers. But if you're on the high end of a third-person shooter and you're coming up with BuildBox or alike, not really credible in that sense. So they're expecting either a Unity or a Unreal Engine kind of stuff. So it's really important to put it in. Yes.